we're especially excited because we have one of our colleagues from the Vanderbilt Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, Dr. Lei Fan, who's going to talk to us about nutrition. We've talked a lot about what we can do to prevent Alzheimer's and a related dementia. And one of the things that's frequently touted is eating properly. Follow a proper diet, follow a Mediterranean diet, follow a MIND diet. But what's consistent with good brain health and also positively aging and aging healthfully? So we're going to learn a little bit more about that today from Dr. Lei Fan from Vanderbilt University Alzheimer's Disease Research Center. Dr. Fan.
Can everyone see clearly?
Yes.
Good. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at Vanderbilt Memory and Alzheimer's Center under the guidance of Dr. Angela Jefferson. It's my great pleasure to present some of my research work today and also brief on nutrition, diet, and brain health. So for diseases such as Alzheimer's disease, also called AD, which a cure is currently not available, maintaining a healthy lifestyle means a lot for dementia prevention. So diet is one of those modifiable lifestyle factors. On average, a person consumes about 35 tons of food during the whole lifetime. That is approximately 1,500 pounds per year. So this justifies the concept of food is medicine because it recognizes a critical role of nutrition in overall health and disease prevention. So during the next 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about why nutrition is so important for brain health, why fatty acid or lipids play a key role in brain health, and what is classic ketogenic diet, and why saturated long-chain fatty acids have adverse impact on Alzheimer's disease, and what is medium-chain triglyceride ketogenic diet, and how to add medium-chain fatty acids to a diet, and what is Mediterranean diet and MIND diet, and how MIND diet impact Alzheimer's disease risk. So our brain takes care of our thoughts, movement, breathing, heartbeat. It never shuts down. It works 24 hours, even while you are asleep. So to maintain such a constantly working computer, you need a constant supply of energy. Our brain accounts for only 2% of body weight, 20% of oxygen consumption, and 25% of glucose utilization. So in most situations, glucose is the main source of energy. However, in some other situations, like fasting or starvation with limited food sources, ketone bodies that are produced from fatty acids may serve as an alternative energy supply. So you might not know that brain is actually the fattiest organ in our body. 60% of the dry weight of the brain consists of lipids or fats. But why does our brain need such a high amount of lipids or fats? So if we look into the most basic building blocks of our brain, which is called neuron, the neuron have lipid-rich cell membranes that are made of phospholipids. So phospholipids provide structural support for neurons. And another lipid-rich substance is called myelin sheaths. Myelin sheaths wrapped around the nerve fibers like insulation on electrical wires. So myelin sheaths enables rapid transmission of information between neurons. And the diet is the main source of fatty acid. There are saturated fatty acid versus unsaturated fatty acid, depending on whether they have a straight or band carbon chain structure. And in the family of saturated fat, there is the youngest brother, short chain fatty acid, with less than 6 carbon atoms. And we have the second boy, medium chain fatty acid, with 6 to 12 carbon atoms. And we have the oldest brother, long-chain fatty acid with greater than 12 carbon atoms. So those fatty acids have distinct effects on brain health, although they belong to the same family of saturated fat. In 1920s, a diet therapy was first introduced to treat children with epilepsy. And this diet is called classic ketogenic diet. Basically, it restricts the intake of carbohydrates, and it comprises 60 to 80% of total energy intake from fat, mainly through saturated long-chain fatty acid. So the purpose of maintaining such a low carbohydrate intake and such a high fat intake was to induce a state called ketosis. So ketosis means your body primarily uses ketone body from fat for energy supply instead of glucose. And this shift in energy supply from glucose to ketone body can stabilize neuronal activity and prevent a seizure. Since then, the classic ketogenic diet has been used for losing body weight and for the treatment of obesity and neurodegenerative diseases. However, this classic ketogenic diet requires extremely low carbohydrate intake and thus has very poor tolerance and compliance. So we are interested in saturated long-chain fatty acid because saturated long-chain fatty acid, along with the other two brothers, that is medium-chain and short-chain fatty acid, they have such different effect on brain health, even though they belong to the same family of saturated fat. So previous experimental studies have found saturated long-chain fatty acid are associated with beta amyloid accumulation and tau pathology, both of which have been considered as a hallmark event in the development of Alzheimer's disease, also known as AD. So over the 20 years of AD progression, there is a transition stage called mild cognitive impairment, MCI. Between the normal cognition and AD, there is this transition stage, MCI. So we are interested in to know the relationship between saturated long-chain fatty acid and the subsequent of developing MCI or AD. So we're interested in answer this question because if we can establish this association, we can use saturated long-chain fatty acid in the blood as biomarkers for risk stratification in high-risk populations. So we leverage the existing data from ADNI cohort. We separate the individuals into those with normal cognition and those with MCI according to their baseline cognitive status. Then we follow up. We want to know whether and when they convert from normal cognition to MCI, and whether and when they progress from MCI to AD. So we found that, we found that saturated long-chain fatty acid in the blood are associated with substantially increased risk of conversion from MCI to AD. However, we did not observe increased risk associated with saturated long-chain fatty acid for the conversion from normal cognition to MCI. So how can we benefit from increased ketone body while also avoid the adverse effect of saturated long-chain fatty acid? A modified medium-chain triglyceride ketogenic diet, also called MCT ketogenic diet, has been developed to induce high levels of ketone body while also improve the compliance of this kind of diet. It typically comprises two different kinds of medium chain fatty acid, that is C8 and C10. In total, it provides about half of the total energy from fat, which is much less than the classic ketogenic diet. So in previous randomized trials, those patients with MCI or AD who received oral supplementation of this MCT oil showed improved cognitive improvement, but the improved cognitive performance was only seen among those who do not carry the ApoE4 genotype. as you know, the ApoE4 genotype has been associated with increased risk of developing AD. So medium chain fatty acid naturally exists in coconut, in tropical oils, and in dairy products. Medium chain fatty acid can be quickly absorbed in the gut, be transported to the liver through the portal vein and cross the blood-brain barrier and enter the mitochondria, which is the battery for energy production in cells, and then be metabolized in the mitochondria very quickly for energy production. So medium chain fatty acids are very efficient in absorption and in energy production. So in addition to dietary intake, medium chain fatty acid can also be produced through microbial fermentation. So the bread we eat has a pleasant flavor. So actually that flavor comes from the added medium chain fatty acid that were produced from yeast fermentation. So in industry, when industrial yeast fermentation, when supplementing magnesium in the fermentation chamber, they observed significant improved rate of sugar consumption and production yield. So, however, no study have examined whether magnesium supplementation could affect the microbial fermentation of medium chain fatty acid. So we hypothesized that optimized dietary calcium magnesium intake ratio by magnesium supplementation could lead to increased circulating levels of medium chain fatty acid, mainly through increased production from gut microbial fermentation. So we test our hypothesis in a precision-based randomized control trial. So this trial recruited 240 participants, and those participants all have a high calcium magnesium intake ratio. In other words, they consume a high amount of calcium-rich food, such as red meat, cheese, and they consume a low amount of magnesium-rich food, such as vegetable, fruits, and nuts. So based on our previous findings, calcium magnesium ratio, intake ratio around 2.3 would bring about the most health benefits. So in this trial, we implemented a 12-week personalized dosed magnesium supplementation strategy to reduce the calcium magnesium intake ratio to an optimal level of 2.3. And we found that the magnesium supplementation leads to increased circulating levels of medium chain fatty acid, which can be attributed to enhanced production of medium chain fatty acid from gut microbial fermentation and sucrose consumption. So how can we add medium chain fatty acid into our daily diet? We can either consume foods rich in medium chain fatty acids, such as coconut, or use coconut oil in moderation for baking and cooking. And we can also consume dairy products, preferably from grass-fed sources. And we can also add the MCT oil into our drinks, like coffee and tea. And we can also consume more magnesium-rich foods to boost our gut microbiome for production of medium chain fatty acid, such as nuts and seeds, legumes, leafy greens, whole grains, dark chocolate. So now we are going to pivot towards another important topic, that is healthy dietary patterns. Over the past few decades, the focus of nutrition research and dietary guidelines for Americans have shifted from single nutrients to healthy eating patterns, because healthy eating patterns can reflect more of the pattern or component and features of the entire diet. For example, like a few years ago, the recommended daily intake of magnesium would be for men 420 milligrams per day, for women 320 milligrams per day. But nowadays, the nutrition research and dietary guidelines would recommend consuming high fruits, vegetables, and nuts several times a week. And because each of the food items contains multiple nutrients and with complex interactions, it's just not feasible to isolate them and examine their separate effects on diseases. And also, the dietary patterns are more consistent over time. So some dietary patterns are culturally based. For example, the Mediterranean diet and the traditional Japanese diet. Some other healthy eating dietary patterns are developed for specific reasons or purposes, such as DASH diet is designed for lowering blood pressure and cholesterol levels. And MIND diet was specifically developed for neuroprotection and dementia prevention. The Mediterranean diet typically encourages consuming plant-based foods such as fresh vegetables and fruits, nuts, seeds, beans and legumes, whole grains, and it encourages consuming healthy fat from olive oil and fatty fish rich in omega-3 fatty acid. And it specifies moderate consumption of dairy products and poultry. And it recommended limited consumption of red meat and sweets. And also, red wine in moderation is part of the Mediterranean lifestyle. So in addition to Mediterranean diet, there are another healthy dietary patterns modified from the Mediterranean diet. So MIND diet is one of them. So MIND diet was tailored for neuroprotection and dementia prevention. And the MIND diet is kind of a hybrid of Mediterranean diet and the DASH diet. So as you can see, similar to the Mediterranean diet and DASH diet, the MIND diet also emphasize plant-based food and limited animal-sourced products. And MIND diet encourages consuming at least 3 servings of whole grain each day, at least 1 dark green salad, and 1 other vegetable each day. And it encourages consuming berries at least twice a week, at least 1 ounce servings of nuts each day, and beans of legumes at least every other day, and poultry at least twice a week, fish at least once a week. On the other hand, it recommended limiting those unhealthy food, such as no more than 1 tablespoon a day of butter or margarine. Choose olive oil instead, and cheese, fried fast food, no more than once a week, and pastries and sweets less than 5 times a week. So as you can see, the MIND diet share a lot of similarities with Mediterranean diet and DASH diet. However, it emphasizes on consuming berries and leafy green, because based on existing knowledge, berries and leafy green, instead of total fruit consumption, have the most health benefits for brain health. And also the MIND diet specifies like consuming fatty fish meal more than once a week. But in Mediterranean diet, it's more than 6 times a week. So because based on existing knowledge, if you consume fatty fish meals more than once a week, it didn't bring additional health benefits. So I'm gonna summarize the MIND diet for you. Plants are good. Limit animal food and animal products, and berries and leafy greens are good. And fatty fish meal at least once a week. Additional meals more than that didn't bring additional benefits. So several publications have also demonstrated the impact of MIND diet and risk of Alzheimer's disease. So in one publication, they divided those individuals into 3 groups, low, medium, and high, according to their adherence to the MIND diet. And they found a higher MIND diet score related to a slower rate of cognitive decline, equivalent to 7.5 years of younger age. In other words, those individuals with the highest third score of MIND diet are 7.5 years younger in cognitive performance compared to those within the lowest search score group. And in another study, they reported the highest MIND score tertile showed a 53% reduction in the rate of developing AD. In other words, those individuals with the highest search score of MIND diet are 53% less likely to develop Alzheimer's disease compared to those with the lowest search score of MIND diet. So let us wrap up what we have talked about. Our brain needs a constant supply of energy. Lipids serve as structural support and energy storage and facilitate neuronal communication. Classic ketogenic diet shifts energy source from glucose to ketone body. And saturated long-chain fatty acids increase the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. A modified medium-chain triglyceride ketogenic diet improves cognition. Magnesium supplementation can increase the circulating levels of medium-chain fatty acid through enhanced gut microbial fermentation. We also talked about how to add medium-chain fatty acid and magnesium-rich foods to your daily diet. Mediterranean diet and MIND diet share common features while also emphasizing different aspects. A higher adherence to MIND diet related to a slower rate of cognitive decline and a reduction in incident rate of developing Alzheimer's disease. Finally, I would like to show my appreciation for all the support from my mentor, Dr. Jefferson, my co-mentors, collaborators, and colleagues. These findings would not have been possible without their contributions. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fan. There are several questions in the chat, and for some people, they want some real easy answers. So I'm going to let you answer some of them, but let me, as a provider, help our audience and get the answers that they need. Just about all of us have access to a dietitian in our hospitals who can kind of certainly prescribe the proper diet for us in greater detail and give us the specific terms. If you are a diabetic, there are certain foods that you can eat and you shouldn't eat, but both the Mediterranean diet and the MIND diet are diets that are good for any of those disorders. The DASH diet, which is designed to reduce high blood pressure and control blood sugars, is also a good diet, good healthy diet. I need you to, if you are more interested in getting greater specifics, to make an appointment with your dietitian. A dietitian can be found at a hospital. It's usually found at a hospital, and they can advise you, and your insurance should cover that consultation because it is a consultation. If you have a special need, if you are diabetic, if you are somebody who suffers from kidney disease, your diet has to be even more specific. Dr. Fan has done an excellent job giving you photos, showing you differences, and you will be able to look at this later on as you pull up this particular power presentation on our YouTube channel. But I do want to encourage you, if you have greater questions and you want greater specificity, and I'm going to say a designer-designed diet for yourselves, something that you can follow, I need you to make an appointment with your dietitian who can be found at your local hospital or healthcare facility. With that, Dr. Fan, some of the people are asking, they got a little befuddled, and I have to honestly admit that that's kind of one of my problems. Medium chain fatty acids, long chain fatty acids. In terms of easy speak, medium chain fatty acids were in coconut oil. Where else can we get a medium chain fatty acid in our diet? What other food contains that?
So the issue is that usually coconut contains a high amount of medium chain fatty acid, but it also contains a high amount of long chain fatty acid. So I know that some grocery stores, they have MCT oil that restrictively included the medium chain fatty acid, such as C8 and C10, but not those saturated long chain fatty acid. So I think this could be a good choice to try to add in our daily drink or cooking. But for natural foods like tropical oil and coconut, I would recommend use it in moderation for baking, or just because in coconut, it's about 50%, among all the total fat, 50% would be long chain fatty acid. So yeah, I think
But you go on. You wanted us to really eat more vegetables, and you talked about magnesium. Is that a vegetable thing, or are you advocating supplementation for that as well?
So some rule of thumb, first, natural food, naturally fresh food is better than supplement. This is one. And also second, high fiber, minimally processed fruits and vegetable provides the high amount of fiber and polyphenol. Those natural things can go against your like oxidative stress that are related to disease. So I would recommend consume more plant-based and freshly cooked, minimally processed fruits and vegetables that contain high amount of fiber and magnesium. Because in natural plant, magnesium are usually connected with fiber.
Okay, you used in your example a Japanese diet, and you know, in some circles, a Japanese flavor diet is centered diet is a little bit better. Because we have people who are of Japanese ancestry and they follow a Japanese diet. Should they change their diet to eat that? Or to eat a Mediterranean diet or consume a Japanese diet? People in Japan live longer than people anyplace else.
Yeah, it's such a good question. So for those dietary patterns, one thing we cannot overlook is the cultural specific dietary pattern. Because if you are an ancestor, if you have ancestor like of Japan, if you are raised in a way that Japanese traditional food are just regularly served in your family, it's a good advantage to include those healthy components in your daily eating habit. So I would recommend that dietary patterns is one thing that we know what's good for us, but the implementation is another thing because it involves more behavioral change. If you want to shift from one diet to another diet, especially it's like if you want to implement Mediterranean diet in your family, you need to add on and build up from baby steps because human behaviors are just hard to change. So if you are raised in a Japanese ancestry, then I would recommend you could add more of those healthy components from traditional Japanese diet into your daily diet, not necessarily completely shifting to a Mediterranean diet or Mayan diet. But you can also include, for example, you know that in Mayan diet, leafy green and berries are so good for your brain, then you could consume more of those parts. It's kind of a personalized dietary pattern based on your own background, family and parenting practice, based on your food flavor, those kind of things.
Can you see some of the questions in the chat, Dr. Fan?
Yeah.
What are your, I mean, I see a lot of different things here, but I'm going to go back to I need you to speak to a dietitian, but in your research, you talked about, we gave them media. What did you feed the people for your research? What was their meal pattern in the research that you did? What did you feed them?
Do you mean the PPCC, the trial, or do you mean the
trial that you referenced? What did the people eat?
So the PPCCT trial is actually originally designed for chemo prevention for colorectal cancer. It is not supposed for Alzheimer's disease trial. However, the dietary part, because it is a precision-based randomized trial, it included a precision-based magnesium dose strategy, so which become a good resources for us to do some post hoc analysis in this unique resource. The diet, generally, we cannot say they employ a specific diet pattern, but from the calcium magnesium intake ratio collected from their food intake data, we can assume, we can assess that they are consuming like high amount of calcium rich food and low magnesium rich food. And because calcium magnesium are naturally antagonists in the human body, especially for the reabsorption in the kidney. So if you have a very high calcium magnesium intake ratio, you are easy to get like hypertension or cardiovascular associated diseases. And if you supplement magnesium in this population, you are gonna naturally like mitigate their insulin resistance and those conditions that are associated with magnesium deficiency, because high calcium magnesium intake ratio causes indirect magnesium deficiency in those population. So, and in this trial, we didn't use dietary intervention. We use a magnesium supplementation because for trial, it was implemented in about 10 years ago. So for this specific trial, we use capsule of magnesium as a supplement. It's not dietary interventions. But in the future, we would like to incorporate more like provided food, like we might have a central kitchen for those medically tailored food to incorporate it in those trials.
So in the trial that you referenced, there really wasn't a specific diet that was followed. You just did they just added a magnesium supplement. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's very accurate.
Okay. So on that note, there is a question in the Q&A that asks about ApoE4 and long chain fatty acids. Did you do any, was there any study of genetics and the types of diets people should eat, particularly as it relates to ApoE4 positivity? ApoE4 is a gene. If you have two of them, one from your mother and one from your father, that makes it more likely that one develops Alzheimer's. Did they correlate a diet for Alzheimer's genetics? Probably not, but did they? Has there been?
No, to my knowledge, I haven't known there is a specific diet pattern designed for ApoE4 individuals. But generally speaking, I think ApoE increases the risk of developing AD. It's still controversial because the mechanism is not very clear. The cholesterol and the fat metabolism may be involved, but it's definitely not clear. So I think generally speaking, you would want to do a holistic control, for example, to improve your insulin resistance state and hypertension, and try to eat as healthy as possible and try to maintain at least 30 minutes of physical activity and try to be socially active. So those kind of things all together will be a integrative healthy package that can reduce your risk of developing AD in ApoE4 carriers.
Right. Okay, so just to recap, everybody, Dr. Fan is telling you that consuming the proper kind of diet, exercise, getting sleep, lifestyle modification, which is what we've been preaching, is what you can do to make it less likely that you develop Alzheimer's or related dementia. So diet, we're learning about diet today, exercise, sleep, those are things that you can improve upon to make it less likely that you develop Alzheimer's or related dementia. And yes, following the Mediterranean diet, the MIND diet, is what she has done the work on. And eating foods rich in magnesium, correct, Dr. Fan?
Yes, magnesium-rich food.
And an example of a magnesium-rich food, that would be something like kale, right?
leafy green
Dark
vegetables,
green leafy vegetables. Okay. All right.
nuts.
I think berries too is in there, but anyway, magnesium rich foods. You had some really pretty graphics, some really pretty pictures of the things you wanted us to eat. And if it's at all possible, that would be good. So diet, magnesium rich foods, exercise, sleep. Those are things that make it less likely that we develop Alzheimer's or related disease. Nori is a type of seaweed, I believe, right? Somebody put that in the chat. I'm trying to answer the questions as I see them. So my trusted pillars of support here have to jump in here and help me. I can't see everything. Other questions for Dr. Fan? Okay, so we are right. Nori is seafood. Okay. Magnesium citrate supplement. Did you use pure magnesium or magnesium citrate? I'm not sure what that is.
So magnesium citrate has better absorption than the other one. So I would recommend magnesium citrate.
We have a couple more minutes. I do have one other question. Dr. Fan said she's a postdoc, but she is also a physician. Are you a neurologist, Dr. Fan?
No, I got my MD, PhD in China, and after that, I came to Vanderbilt to study at MPH program. So after that, I did postdoctoral fellowship. Yeah, that's
Okay. All right. I just want them to know that you're a medical doctor as well as what we call a physician scientist. So physician scientists do a lot of work here, and it's not just giving you a prescription. So let me see what else we've got in the chat, but this has been fantastic.
There seems to be a theme about sugar and the implications around sugar in your diet. Can you talk about that?
Sorry, what's your question again?
It's about sugar. Okay. And one thing I tried to send people in the chat, glucose, you use the word glucose a lot. And so for our audience, glucose is sugar, and carbohydrates, all the starchy stuff, breaks down into glucose or sugar. And if you eat just pure sugar, you're getting too much of an overload of carbohydrate. And so the kinds of diets we're advocating here aren't necessarily carbohydrate rich. She talked about fiber, she talked about other things. Can you talk a little bit more about, I don't want to say glucose metabolism, but there are a lot of people who are listening who are talking about diabetes and ketogenic diets. We've heard of ketogenic diets in people who have diabetes, and that has to do with the breakdown of sugars. Can you talk about that a little bit?
So sugar is one kind of carbohydrate. So for example, like the big problem is the added sugar. Like in carrot, it definitely have carbohydrate, have sugar, but it's natural and usually combined with fiber. But for sweets, candies, pastries, those processed food, they added sugar manually. So added sugar, if you eat very small amount of those food or drinks, your blood glucose may increase significantly in a short time. So the problem is like pick those natural carbohydrates that naturally from fruits and vegetables that not contain added sugar. Does that make sense?
Excellent. It makes perfect sense. So let me recap just to make sure everybody's on the right page. Yes, there are some fruits and some vegetables that have a high sugar content, but that is a natural sugar content. We want you to eat things that have natural sugars in them and not to add sugar, not to take the sugar, the domino sugar, and add it to your food. Sugar that comes from the carrots, sugar that comes from the fruits is preferable. Yes, sugar is sugar, and you want to minimize those things. But eating an orange is better for you than drinking a glass of orange juice. So we're not going to get mixed up in all of this and get, split hairs over it. It's what's a naturally occurring fruit what's a naturally occurring carbohydrate versus something I've added to it. So we're not going to pour the sugar bowl on top of our fruit, our vegetables. Naturally occurring. Yes, for those of us who are diabetic, there are some foods that are better for us in terms of sugar level than others. And again, to get better answers and more clear answers for your specific questions, it's really good to make an appointment with a dietitian. So there's a question here about honey. That's a natural sugar, right? Agave syrup, those are natural sugars. In general, shouldn't we also control natural sugars? If you are a diabetic, that is really a good problem. That is a real problem for you. Everything that we eat is a natural fruit or a natural vegetable will break down into a carbohydrate and other things. So again, we want you to eat foods that naturally are sweet rather than adding white refined sugar or all of that other stuff to it. If you want to drink coffee in the morning, drink coffee. You don't have to add sugar and cream. That's something we like. Try sugar. Coffee is better for you. You get greater antioxidants when you don't add all the stuff, as Dr. Oz would say, make a candy bar out of it. So naturally sweetened foods are better for you than foods that have added sugars to them. We want naturally occurring sweetened foods as opposed to sweetened processed foods. Anything you buy in a package in a store is not what you want. Better you go out to the garden, pull it up and cook it. I think that helps. I hope it does anyway. Shouldn't we also try to control natural sugars? For diabetics, that's a real specific problem. Again, I'm going to get you to your nutritionist. Ms. Murray, you are very detailed and very specific in your questions, and I really want you to see a dietitian who can advise more specifically for everybody's specific needs. I think that does it. Thank you so much, Dr. Fan. We've learned a lot. And for everybody who's listening, this program will be on our YouTube within a week. And hopefully we can follow up again. Okay?